podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Good
How
morning
are you,
to
ladies?
you too.
Thank you.
Good.
Yes, excellent. How are you ladies today? How was your week?
Busy week.
Yeah. School stuff and
mostly school stuff.
and-
Actually, sister had a birthday, as she
Nice.
does every year.
Yes, that's right.
And it fell during the week, and so that was really fun. We had I don't know if Just Brays is a chain that is anywhere outside of Halton, which is where my parents are, which is where my sister is. But basically it's like fusion fast food. So it was like kimchi bap poutine, which was amazing, and then like this Nashville chicken sandwich thing with like fried chicken. Oh my gosh, you guys, it was so good. I paid for it. The next day I was like, I felt disgusting, but it was worth it.
Oh, worth it.
Was
Okay.
So
yeah.
That's great.
Fun. So birthdays, my 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old nephew still gets to pick out the cake for everybody. So it doesn't matter whose birthday it is. He's the one who gets to decide what the cake is. And then also what goes on top of the cake. So I think it was for my dad's birthday or something one time. And we put Thomas the Train on the cake, like just the letters, the writing, Thomas the Train on the top of the cake. So that,
So that he'd be happy.
That's good.
Two of my siblings also had birthdays this week, actually.
Really?
On Monday and Tuesday? No, Sunday and Monday, the 9th and the 10th, anyways. So that's good. We
so many birthdays.
So many birthdays.
I always feel bad for people whose birthdays fall really near Christmas, like my little nephew, his is December 12th. So it's getting up there, but there's one person I know whose birthday is on Christmas.
Yeah, I know.
So it's like half the day is spent celebrating Christmas, the other half of the day is spent celebrating birthdays, but it's just kind of
mine's in February, so it's like you get Christmas and all the glow, and then you get into winter, and then everything gets depressing, but then your birthday comes and it's good.
well, that's nice. That's
good.
awesome.
Like early January, like January, February birthdays are like, it's like well placed, I don't know.
Definitely.
Can I tell you guys, speaking of Christmas, I was helping my sister do some crafts for this craft fair thing. And so I was doing some painting of these Christmas bulbs, I was like, it'd be kind of funny. I wonder if people would like this or would think it's just humorous. So I painted the Christmas bulbs with all this nice like snow, looked really nice. And then I put 2020 on it. And then on the other side, I put dumpster fire on it. So I was like, either people are going to think it's totally awful.
I think people are going to love it.
I think, because it's, it's just one of those things.
Because
I kind of want to remember it that way, in a way. Like, you want to laugh about it, and you want to have an ornament that, everybody go buy Erin's sister's ornaments that are perfectly descriptive of the year.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, man. It's a good thing God brings good out of all things,
True.
Yeah, it is good.
Amen.
It's very good.
Sweet. All right. Well, let's introduce the topic for today. So today is obviously just the three of us. We are here having a discussion ourselves.
Yes,
nice. And that was so good. Also, Rachel, I just have to say, if anybody follows Rachel on Instagram, is it Music Mondays?
Yeah, Musical Mondays. Yeah.
Okay, Musical Mondays. So Rachel goes on Instagram and she sings a song from some kind of musical. And then people have to guess what it is, and she's just very well versed in musicals. So it's,
that is really fun.
Yeah, so
it's super
fun. I'm like, my thing is, I always say I hate musicals. I don't hate musicals. I just don't listen to them ever.
Which is fair. I know people who really do hate musicals, and I understand, but I really love them, and that's just.
I know that's good. That's good. It's just funny because I'm doing a PhD in music, so you'd think I at least would like them a little bit. But
I feel like a lot of music people don't, though, because they're like, Again, I get it.
I'm not funny, sure. But anyways, that's very cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I'll have to film it sometimes, but I have been known to drive around like downtown Toronto or somewhere with windows open, blasting Defying Gravity and then singing it at people.
I can confirm because I have been in the car with Erin on more than one occasion with the windows down singing Defying Gravity, which I actually can sing parts of because
it's so funny though. Because people are like, what is happening?
I love that though.
Do that. I'll give you an
that.
Instagram takeover for my personal account, and then you can do a musical Monday.
Awesome.
That's
we'll
amazing.
Do it. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Done.
Okay. Sweet. We'll plan it.
So if I go on my bicycle, I don't have a car, but if I go on my bicycle and sing a musical song,
you could do it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Then you can take it over on another point. Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many things to look forward to. You know? In 2021, the non-dumpster fire year.
We hope.
That's right. Please, Lord. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so back to the topic of the day. Today's topic is, this is actually airing on the feast day of St. John of the Cross. So we thought that it would be a great idea to just actually talk about St. John of the Cross and a little bit about him. And then we have a really great quote and just our own experience with St. John of the Cross. As a way of getting to know the man who is a big inspiration for this podcast, and where we got the name In the Thicket. So if you are wondering about the name In the Thicket, we have a little mini episode of why the name In the Thicket. And so that goes into the actual quote that inspired the name. But so here is a little bit about St. John of the Cross. So he was born in 1542. Died in 1591, and he was a Carmelite. So he basically came from a poor family because his father died, and his mother was working, I think, as a seamstress, and so they were very poor when he was young. And he ended up joining the Carmelite order, and he took the name at first John of Saint Matthias, which is cool. So so he went to the university in Salamanca to study theology and philosophy. He definitely became like an expert in scripture. So he was a scripture theologian, and especially also in the Song of Songs. So he was definitely a real kind of academic in that area, and he actually translated it into Spanish, which is controversial because it was forbidden at the time to translate the Bible into other languages other than Latin, because it was meant to protect the original meaning of scripture, right? So that the words of scripture wouldn't be translated improperly. And he became a priest. After he became a priest, he actually considered joining the Carthusian order. So like the like super in crazy, like contemplative, like monastic, where they have their individual cells and they have basically just all day kind of in silence, except for the time that they come together to chant the office in common. And so that was kind of the life that he was looking for, or that he felt called to. But then he happened to meet Saint Teresa of Avila, and she was a Carmelite nun, and she asked him to join her in reforming the Carmelite order. So at the time, the Carmelite order had kind of fallen away from some of the original practices of the original rule. And so Teresa had this, and Teresa is also one of my favorite saints. Like she is like right up there, with Mother Teresa and Padre Pio and John Paul II, and so she really had this desire in her heart to kind of bring things back to the original rule, which was much more looking at like penance and a strict rule, and protecting the quiet and the ability to pray in the convent and those kind of things. So she asked him to kind of come along with her in that mission, and so he did. And they founded a new monastery, and they kind of traveled. He actually traveled, like, I forget what the number that I read was, like 18,000 miles or something like that, all over Spain by foot. So
the original what is the thing called where you walk a long time in Spain?
The Camino.
The Camino,
the original. He had his like own personal Camino. We should make a thing of that, like here's the Camino of John of the Cross. You just basically walk from one end of Spain all over wherever you want till you've walked 18,000 miles, and then you can stop wherever you are and die, because that's
that's what he did. Did he just okay? Anyways, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Getting off track.
Yes. No, it's so good. So basically, obviously, as you can imagine, for both Teresa and John, reforming the Carmelite order was met with like a huge amount of resistance, because some of those who did not want to see any of the more austere measures introduced were very opposed to this reforming of things. And so he actually was kidnapped by his own order and brought before court and placed on trial for disobedience, and was punished by imprisonment. So there was like a cell in the monastery that he was at that was so small that he could barely lie on the floor. He was fed only bread and water, maybe a little bit of salt fish every once in a while. Every week he was taken into public and lashed, and then returned to his cell. And the only things that he had were a prayer book and an oil lamp to read it by. And to pass the time, he wrote some poems on paper that was smuggled to him by the friar who was guarding his cell. So he would, he basically became this influential kind of poet, and he wrote these beautiful things like The Ascent of Mount Carmel, who one of our other guests has helpfully let us know that if you are reading John of the Cross, you have to read, he's really known for Dark Night of the Soul, right? Where he talks about the Night of the Sense and the Night of the Spirit, which are these two very profound times of desolation that the soul goes through in its purification. But that is meant to be read with the ascent of Mount Carmel. And he wrote so beautifully about the Song of Songs and the love of God for the soul, but also because of this experience of suffering that he encountered that was so profound. There's so much that came out of that from him in terms of suffering and the necessity of suffering and the purification of the soul and the presence of God in it and the love of God in it and all of these crazy things. So he, along with a lot of the other mystics of that time, like Teresa of Avila, Catherine of Siena, all these mystics kind of wrote a lot of what we would say as the kind of roadmap of the spiritual life. So how we go through these purifications and grow deeper in that relationship of love with God. And yeah, so he's a part of that huge tradition. So good news, eventually he managed to pry open his cell door from its hinges and escape.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So he did not die in that cell, which is great. And then it eventually was Pope Gregory who kind of authorized the split of the Carmelites. So you have the Discalced Carmelites, which were Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, kind of, and they were called Discalced because they didn't wear sandals, like they didn't wear anything on their feet. And then the rest of the orders. So so that's basically it. He died of an infection on December 14th, 1591. And even in burial, there was disagreement about where he should be buried. So they cut him up and buried him in different places.
Oh, wow.
His body in different places.
That is such a Catholic thing.
I know, right? So that is your little bit of history on St. John of the Cross. Yeah. So maybe I'll turn it over to you, ladies. So in terms of how he's maybe either showed up in your life or like connections to John of the Cross, what have you found in your lives? Maybe we'll start with you, Rachel.
Sure. So I feel like I've known about him and kind of known him most of my life because my uncle who's a priest, he has a great devotion to a lot of the saints. I grew up sort of with him and my whole family. And so St. Teresa of Avila was like just a huge part of, my, like a big relationship, I guess, in my life. And truly, like I remember in high school, I read the story of a soul, not the story of soul, St. Teresa, but her own autobiography, St. Teresa's autobiography. And, and I just really identified with her a lot. And I knew she had this friend who she just loved so dearly, who was St. John. And there was this relationship. It wasn't necessarily like St. Francis and Clare, but it was this sort of like this incredibly deep love that the two of them shared. Even though they weren't always together, they were really together in the project that they were working on, you know? And I think so. And then the thing that struck me about him was just like, he had this incredibly soft heart, because he really was a poet. And I think as a creative, like somebody who loves music, somebody who loves writing and reading, like there was an access to God that he had that spoke a language that I really that resonated with me, you know? And so I just love that he wasn't afraid. Like when he talks about, some of his poems are really intense, you know, in terms of how he positions himself before God. Like he really positions himself before God as a lover, which makes sense when you're talking about his knowledge of the Song of Songs. Like I didn't actually know he was so well studied in that, but it makes sense because of the way that he writes about his relationship with God is really in that way, almost like a romantic kind of way. And then just his humility too, just the suffering that he had to go through, having like his own turn against him, you know, which is so hard. Like it's really hard when anyone turns against you, but to have people within your own sort of family,
the community that you've discerned with and that you've welcomed you and become your people. Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah. For them to not just turn against you, but like turn
to imprison you and have
and torture you.
And torture you. Yeah.
Yeah. And tortured. Yeah.
So I just, I was like, I just feel this affinity to like, no, that's not, I've never experienced that in my life, but I really, I have like a really soft place in my heart for St. John of the Cross. I love him.
That's great.
How about you, Nicole?
Yeah, I think the first time I really encountered John of the Cross was in a book called The Fulfillment of All Desire by Ralph Martin, and he takes
love it.
Yeah, it's such a good book, and he takes like the five of the big kind of, I think it's like John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, Therese of Lisieux, Catherine of Siena, and maybe Francis de Sales.
Bernard of Clairvaux?
Bernard, maybe.
Oh yeah,
I forget.
that's right.
I think it might be Bernard of Clairvaux.
Bernard, yeah, okay. And he kind of takes their writings and synthesizes them in a way to talk about the spiritual life and growth. And I read the book a number of years ago and just found it so illuminating for my own just life of prayer. And I think I've read it a couple times, and so that was the first encounter with John of the Cross. But it's funny because I remember hearing I think my parents had some like cassette tapes of a talk by Ralph Martin on John of the Cross, and how he always found him really hard to read, like kind of inaccessible. But then that one day he just read it and everything kind of clicked for him, and then he, became snowballed into writing this book. So I always had it, but always in my mind I was like, oh, okay, St. John of the Cross, if you read the original writings, it's hard. And so anytime I've tried to read, Ascent of Mount Carmel or Dyke Nard of the Soul, I've always been like slightly intimidated, but it's funny, even just as, so it's sort of that indirect connection with him, but even just hearing more of the story that I don't know if I've heard Aaron, like all of those details, or at least it's been a while, since I've heard his story. And just thinking about, okay, this is somebody who was not free externally, right? Who's in prison for this life, and yet continues to have this freedom and this life that he was giving in terms of his writings and stuff. And yet it was this thing of, but not being settled with that, also just not being like, well, I guess I'm going to be in this prison for the rest of my life. Like, he escaped. Yeah. How cool is that? And so, I don't know. I'm just like, kind of, I think that's really beautiful. Anyways, just pondering that right now too.
Can I also say, like, I don't know if you guys have done this, but I have definitely done this before. Like, when I was kind of much like earlier, when I first had my conversion, I was like reading from the mystics. I was like, oh, I'm definitely in Mansion 8 of St. Teresa's thing. And look at and then
totally
like,
done that.
The more have you? And the more like,
but I would have been like, yeah, sorry. I would be like, I think I'm in Mansion either 9 or one. I'm not sure though.
That's right. Yeah. No, I think that's even more true. It's like, yeah, I could be in, but exactly. And then the further I get, the more I'm like, no, I'm not even in the castle yet. Like,
yeah.
Can I be real?
I'm with the moat. Yeah.
So like, I actually haven't read Interior Castle. I have not read Interior Castle, and I know I haven't read it. and I have so Fulfillment of All Desire, which is the Ralph Martin book. I started reading it. It's kind of like the Mother Teresa
really
Come Be My Light
long.
situation, where I was like, I got about like a quarter of the way through and I was like, that's like, no, I'm not even here yet. I can't even do like, it was over to me, it was like overwhelming. I had like the opposite reaction. I was like, that's too much. I'm not there. I have to.
There are some books that are exactly like that. Like I was like that with St. Faustina's Diary. It was too intense for me at one point. And then also even like with John of the Cross, Dark Night of the Soul is not a book to just pick up and read. Like it's not, it really reading. Is not. Yeah, just a little bit of like, like I feel like there's a time that the Lord leads you to some of those more intense books or just that are particularly addressing like where we might be at spiritually. Exactly. And
I think that's really true.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, John of the Cross, he actually has become definitely one of my favorite saints for a number of reasons. So one, I think, is that I had an experience a number of years ago when I was discerning with a religious order, and it was a very painful time for me. It was a very painful and kind of wounding experience, unfortunately, which I think is good to say out loud, that not all discernment experiences are, happy, chappy, and cheery. They're not all happy and cheery, and there can be often a lot of pain associated with vocational discernment, not just for religious life, like with every vocation, and it was very, very, very wounding for me. But what had happened in the months leading up to when I left was that I was having this very intense period of desolation. And I know that it was spiritual desolation. Like I was walking with a spiritual director at the time, and classically it was like intense spiritual desolation, but part of the issue is that it wasn't seen as that with the people that I was in the religious order with. And so anyways, it all kind of culminated on me leaving that order, but I left on the feast day of St. John of the Cross. So that was the day that our meeting had been set for. And it was very personal to me because I was also at the time reading Dark Night of the Soul, and like having that resonance of, like he says in that book that it's not that God is far away, but it's actually that he is nearer to us than he has ever been. And because he is nearer to us in his goodness, it illuminates in us even more all of the imperfections, all of the wound, all of and the pain of that is like this dark night, like is so intense. So that was definitely a huge thing for me, but also even for my own vocation. Like I'm a consecrated virgin, and I spent a lot of time discerning with different religious orders and all of these kind of things. And a long time ago, when I was discerning, at one point, a sister had said to me, what would it look like if Jesus proposed to you? And I just kind of had this image in my heart of him on the cross saying, this is my proposal for you. And like it was one of those moments, like, where you just cannot doubt that this is God, like like it's not your brain doing things, or it's like him breaking in with something important. So so then when I was discerning consecrated virginity and kind of coming back to all of these things, and had started experiencing kind of these areas of more intense suffering in my life and all of those kind of things, and it just turned out that the date of my consecration was September 14th, which is the Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross. And it also happens to be my baptism day. So it was like, so it was like all of those kind of things. So this spirituality of the cross, and, especially through St. John of the Cross has been huge for me. So I'm really grateful to him.
Yeah. That's cool.
I just had a thought where it's like, I want to say to people, when you the saints are people to be encountered, you know, and I think that sometimes, and that's why maybe the Lord like led me to share that I haven't read the Interior Castle, or, you know, it's not like our experiences at St. John of the Cross are super well studied in terms of all of his writings and everything. And not that that's a bad thing. Like, that's so beautiful that we have access to all of this, but not to be intimidated by thinking like, well, I have to like read everything that a saint has written or whatever to really get to know them. Like, I think the saints are people that God, you know, he's gifted them to us as people, as companions, people who can be with us on the journey, and especially understand the suffering that we go through. You know, and I just want to say, don't be afraid. If you have, sometimes it's almost for me like making a new friend, you know, like you sort of meet someone and you kind of chat a little bit and you sort of like feel that sense of like you're hitting it off kind of, and then you kind of want to talk to them a little bit more. So if you're listening to this and St. John of the Cross is kind of doing that for you, where you're like, oh, I kind of feel like
then prepare for suffering in your life to come, because that is what. Just kidding.
He's called St. John of the Cross.
Yeah, so. That's right. It's not St. John of the funnies,
of the rainbows, and but it's
of the cute kittens.
I read I think it was a Facebook, somebody posted this on Facebook the other day, but or maybe it was I'm not sure exactly where I saw this, but you know, talking about the saints, and it was somebody who I think was Catholic, but had just never really thought about the saints as much, and then they were kind of like, I kind of want to, but I don't really know where to start. So then they just pray this prayer of like, okay, Lord, introduce me to some saints that are good. That you want, that are, I don't know, you know, and then ended up, I think there was like went to mass, and there was a certain saint feast day, and they looked up the saints, and it was like, they just resonated and started reading, you know, so that that's another way to be like, okay, Lord, which saint is my saint right now? Who's the one that I need to talk to, you know?
Yeah. Even to recognize like how they come in and out of our lives, and like during different times or seasons, and that was actually super cool, because at my consecration I got to do the thing that they do at ordinations, where you lay on the floor in the middle of the cathedral, and they sang the litany of the saints. But for that, I got to pick the saints. Like there's the standard saints that, you know, they always sing, but then you can pick also and add to it whichever saints have been, you know, an influence in your life. So it was like, even the process of picking those saints was like going back over memory lane of like, oh my gosh, yeah, I remember when I read this from this, or when I was going through this, or when I was, you know, and just seeing like, it just makes the communion of saints be very real. Very real, cool. You know? Yeah.
Which it is. So exactly.
That's right.
Cool.
Exactly. Sweet. Okay, well, why don't I'm going to read this quote that we picked to kind of guide a little bit of the discussion today, which is really beautiful. So it's a different one than the thicket quote that our name comes from. So John writes this: "And I saw the river over which every soul must pass to reach the kingdom of heaven, and the name of that river was suffering. And I saw a boat which carries souls across the river, and the name of that boat was love."
Mm-hmm.
So good one. And he's like known for that, you know, of these, even passing these notes out of, you know, out of the cell or whatever, like these great kind of like one line.
Can you imagine
bombs?
The guard. Can you imagine being the guard? Exactly.
Just like he's like,
oh reading. My gosh.
Yeah, right.
Just like every day he's just getting past these like these little notes, and he's like, this is golden.
Yeah.
That's can you read it again, Erin?
Yes. 100% I can. I got a new phone. Now I have Face ID. It's very new for me.
Fancy.
Oh my. Yes. "And I saw the river over which every soul must pass to reach the kingdom of heaven, and the name of that river was suffering. And I saw a boat which carries souls across the river, and the name of that boat was love."
That's so cool.
So
you know what strikes me is that like, okay, so the first thing is like, suffering is inevitable.
Yep, that's exactly what
it's inevitable.
Struck me.
Yep. You got to cross over the river of suffering. But then my next thought was, okay, well, how do you know, some like, it sounds like it would be a lot worse to try to swim across the river of suffering than to slide over in a boat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And how many of us are maybe trying to avoid suffering, or we are afraid to love because it seems like love is going to take us right across that river, but then we end up just being stuck in the muck and the mud of the river anyways. And so just being like, God, where are you calling me to love today? And like that will to that, and that will help us navigate the sufferings in our life. I don't know exactly, but like, anyways, just like,
yeah. It makes me think even a little bit about, I don't know, like Pelagianism. Is that the heresy where you earn heaven? I think so, yeah. Anyways, whatever. We might get angry theologian phone calls after this. But even a sense of like that, because if you're, I never thought about that, like the river, that there would be another way to be in it, like swimming.
Yeah.
That never even occurred to me. But if you were swimming in the river, it's like it's not possible to, like, there's a boat there, so even sometimes with like,
why would you, there's a boat,
why would you take the boat, just take the boat. Yeah. But really, like, I mean, sometimes even that, like, I feel that in myself, like I'm struggling in my own suffering, like if it's not surrender to the Lord, or if it's not, I don't know, if the Lord is not in it somehow, or I'm not with him in it somehow, then it's just like me floundering in a river that I cannot cross, that I'm like drowning in, and
it's just carrying you somewhere else. And
yeah, I had sort of two thoughts kind of along those lines. And first, I think like this suffering, sometimes there's obviously levels, right? So sometimes being in the boat of love while you're going down the river of suffering means, okay, I woke up and I'm feeling kind of crappy today, but like I'm going to say my morning prayer and God gives me sort of a bit of grace, or somebody else in my family or my life comes in and just kind of helps me out of that rut a little, and then I move on with my day and whatever, and those are like little sufferings I feel like we go through every day. But I think all three of us, in our own sharing with each other, we've gone through sufferings that are like, okay, I like this pain is unbearable. It's not pain that I can kind of work through and then get up and move on. It's just unbearable. And I think that kind of suffering for me, the boat of love in the midst of that suffering, getting on that boat has been a very interesting journey, because I think for me, part of it has been receiving the Lord's answer to the question, like, am I actually loved? You know what I mean? Like, I think part of getting on the boat of love that's hard is that I don't really believe that I am loved, And so it's kind of like I go through this really intense suffering and pain, at the end of which I kind of have to throw up my hands. I remember, like, Diana from a previous podcast of ours, I was just listening to what she had to say the other day, and she's talking about, you just get to the end of your rope and you're like, I have nothing. I really have nothing left. And it's like at that point that the Lord has said to me, I love you right now. Like when you have nothing, I love you, and that experience has been like, almost like a pressure cooker of like, oh, I can't bear it. And then hearing in whatever way God chooses to give that to me, I love you, has been just like the release of, oh, okay. And so I'm still in pain, but I can feel that I'm on the boat now. I am on the boat of love,
Yeah.
When I think about that boat, oh, sorry, you go.
Oh, I just was thinking. Sorry. Okay, you go. Okay. No, you go. Okay. No, I just realized as you were talking, Rachel, that when I was thinking about the boat of love, I'm thinking that I'm the one who has to love. And what you're saying is to receive love, the boat of receiving the love of God. And I think it can be both, but I just hadn't even thought of that. So that's cool.
That's actually, that's exactly kind of what because my first instinct when I read that was even to think about, because of the person that it's coming from, and looking at his description of the stages of the spiritual life and things like that. Like, even if we look at kind of these three stages of the purgative stage, the illuminative stage, and the unitive stage of the spiritual life, they're motivated by different things, right? So like the first stage of purification in the purgative stage is motivated by fear, like largely by fear, of like loss of heaven or loss of God, or, I don't know, not being good or not, like somehow not measuring up or things like that, which is all of us. We all, like, that's the point of the stages, is that we all go through them,
Right.
But then, so like, even looking at that, like the boat that really crosses, the only one that is sufficient to cross the river of suffering is love. So that the Lord is bringing us to this place where our love for him, the only thing that is really in the end sufficient to encounter the suffering or to proceed through the suffering, is love for him, because other things will just make us abandon it. Like, if it's not that, why would we go through this suffering if in the end there wasn't like, it wasn't guided by love of him, like, even if I think about my relatives, like, why, or like supporting somebody who's suffering, like, why would I go through, make sacrifices for them, like all of those kind of things, if I just like the color of their hair, or I was just like afraid of them not picking me up from work next week, or I was like, like, those are very inconsequential. So that was like one thing. And then the other was thinking about like when you were talking, Rachel, about like our own sufferings, I was thinking back to this one time when we were doing this Exodus 90 thing, and we were in my office meeting, and I was like losing it, and like just feeling the weight of all of these things, and how like the two of you plus our secret prayer partner, how the three of you were my boat, like, and the reason you were there was because you love me, and that the Lord was so present in that and was revealing his love for me in that, in such a beautiful way. So even the inclusion of like that boat is not just me and the Lord, like, it's bigger than that,
Yeah, right.
So true.
That is really beautiful.
So cool. Thanks, St. John.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this quote is something, I so many things have come up that I have to think about now too, like the boat of love as what love am I called to give, as well as where am I called to receive it. And it's he's giving us, in a sense, in this poetic way, like the antidote, but not to suffering, like suffering isn't going to end because you get on the boat of love, but the boat of love is the way through. Like there is a way through, basically.
It makes me think of like parents, and when like the things that parents do for their kids, and that they, parents you just love your kids. I don't have kids, but my parents love me, and I've seen it. And even when I've had times, I can remember in different times in my life when I've been in some sort of ministry role, or had kind of maybe a mom role in my life, and someone who I'm kind of responsible for needed to talk at whatever, in the hour in the morning or whatever it is, and just realizing like, oh, I'm completely desiring to be here for this person right now, even though it's kind of a suffering for me, or I might have other stuff that I need to do, like whatever, sleep or something, but it's just so, in realizing like, oh yeah, this, like that grace of love, it kind of, the suffering almost becomes irrelevant because of the love for the person, I just think like parents are good to look to as examples of that, I think.
That's a good point.
Or at least there's a break in it, like, even if you think about being in that boat, like, it's a boat of love, like there is a separation from suffering, and like the suffering is still there, it's still tossing the boat around, it's still, there's still an effect of the waves and an effect of the movement of the water, but it's a much different experience than it is if you were just drowning in the water itself, drowning,
You're not drowning.
You're working with it. You're working with the suffering, and you're letting it become part of your vehicle. Like, like it's what
the
drives,
are pushing you.
Oh, that's girl. So good.
You're like, you're not fighting it anymore. You're letting it carry you to this kingdom of heaven. Yeah.
So beautiful.
I love it.
Oh man, ladies. That's so good. Okay, I'm going to take about 40 things that you've said and pray with them now. But maybe let's turn it to some God winks for this week, shall we?
Sure.
Cool. Anybody want to go first?
I can go again. Okay. I think something for me this week that was, I had a lot going on this week, school-wise and just everything. and then Thursday I had a good day. I had a spiritual direction appointment and a counseling appointment. And just both of them were really wonderful. And I just felt so, like it's not like, oh, now all of my interior stuff that I'm working on is totally clear or something, but just little sparks of light and direction, and also just, I don't know, just like, it was just good. So those are my God winks for this week. Just,
That's cool.
yeah,
Nice.
just grounding. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I can go next. So I think my God wink for this week is that we had enough food at my house for the whole week. So like I cooked some food last weekend, and then we had and then my sister's birth, my parents sent back food to where I live in Hamilton. And so I just didn't have to worry about food, which, I love cooking and I love food, but it just freed up some time so I could do other stuff. And I was like, thank you, Lord, for it's delicious food. So
it's like simple things,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's cool. I had, you ladies kind of know my God wink because you were a little bit in it at the moment, but this week there was somebody who's close to me who was experiencing some a lot of suffering, and so I was kind of going over. I was going to help them out a little bit, or just be with them. And so I was stopping at Starbucks to bring some Starbucks, and I was like feeling a little bit like, when you get into that place and there's somebody close to you suffering, you can't do anything about it, or you can do very little about it. Like you can't take away their suffering, and it's like painful,
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure if they were going to really be okay or what was happening. And anyway, so I stopped at Starbucks to get something for us. And I realized that my purse was in the trunk, and I was like, oh no, I'm using my app, so I hope I have enough money on there. Oh, I should have enough money. It was like $18.70. Guess how much the bill was? $18.70. Like exactly,
so good.
And then I was chatting with the barista there, because the drinks were, took a little while to make, whatever. And she was talking about how her birthday was coming up in November, and the date of her birthday is the exact same date of the birthday of the person that I was going to see, who is not having that. So, and the Lord, I find he does that sometimes with me, just those things that are they're not really coincidences,
No,
because
come on,
is there,
exactly.
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
it's him being don't freak out, I'm still here,
totally,
nothing
I'm in control.
my control. Yeah, totally. So
in the details, in a way.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
With you and everything.
Yeah,
that's great.
Exactly.
Love it,
man. Cool. Okay, so maybe I know you say this kind of in the end segment of the music that comes after we're done, Rachel, but if people are listening, I want to ask everybody if you wouldn't mind going on to whatever device or whatever platform you listen to this podcast on, and giving us a rating and a review, because that actually helps us a lot to get the word out to people about the podcast and to help reach more people. So I'm like maybe we can be one of Apple Podcasts' new and noteworthy podcasts.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, which feels like shameless self-promotion, except for I'm like, no, the Lord has arranged too much of this for it to be.
This is not about us, it's about Jesus.
No. That's right. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And suffering, yay.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, always a pleasure, ladies. Yeah, and to talk about St. John of the Cross.
Yeah, happy feast day of St. John of the Cross.
Happy feast day of St. John of the Cross, everybody. All right, well, God bless. Talk to you next week. God bless you.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough, and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless, and see you next week.